DiJonai intentionally came out to get her across the neck like she did. But it did happen, and I thought it was the right call. But one of the things about Nay is that she's going to play her butt off, man. She's going to compete. Nobody's going to go walking in for a layup. And so, I don't oppose the hard foul. But I also don't think that she intentionally went.
Yeah, it's a hard foul going up for a layup. Everybody has seen it at this point. And Carrington, Stephanie White after the game didn't stand up for Sophie, but rather said she had no problem with the hard foul. Carrington then goes to Threads and posts white privilege with an @ to the Indiana Fever. Yet another contentious moment that now feels like it can't even just be about the game. It's about race. It's about everything else. Caroline, how do we break this down?
Obviously, it would be easy for you outside for fans to read something into a foul happening with Sophie Cunningham, just the way that she's been in the headlines lately. Did you get a sense that there was any extra emotion, anything like that coming into this game from your players? Did you guys have any internal conversations about that heading into this game?
No, we're fighting for our lives to try to make the playoffs. So DiJonai is a passionate player, just like most of our players on our team. And
Wnba star Sophie Cunningham, already at the center of a fight over transgender participation, took a flagrant foul from an opposing player who was ejected from the game. Our Jan Crawford is following the story.
Yes. She calls it white privilege. Now, keep in mind, the woman who did the assault and battery literally got kicked out of the game because she did a technical foul too. You can't do somebody in the face like that without getting kicked out of the game. That could have been any player. But
player got choked to the floor. Her own coach shrugged it off like it was nothing. Her own opponent went online and called it privilege. And somehow none of that was even the strangest part of the story. Stick around, because by the end of this, you're going to see how one foul turned into something way bigger than basketball. Let's slow this down and walk through exactly what happened. Because the way this unfolded says a lot more about this league than the actual play on the court ever could. It started in a split second. The kind of moment that happens 100 times a game and usually means nothing. Music, Sophie Cunningham was flying down the floor in transition. No defender in front of her. A wide open lane. A real clean scoring chance. Music, she was moving fast, leaning forward, fully committed to the drive, which means she was also completely exposed the way every player is the instant they attack the rim at full speed. Music, that's the exact moment a defender is supposed to show restraint. That's the moment where the rule book expects discipline. Music, not desperation. Instead, a Chicago defender came sprinting in from behind her way too late to make any real play on the ball. This wasn't a strip attempt. It wasn't a contest at the rim. Her arm swung across Cunningham's neck and upper body, and Cunningham got yanked backward off her feet in one violent motion. She hit the floor hard. Not a stumble, not a trip over someone's foot. A hard off-balance crash caused directly by contact around her throat. For a second, the whole building probably held its breath. That's the kind of fall that looks worse in real time than it even does on replay. And it looked bad enough on replay. The officials didn't hesitate. They stopped play immediately, walked over to the monitor, and came back with an upgraded call. Flagrant foul level 2. Automatic ejection. No discussion. And here's the thing that gets lost in everything that came after. That call wasn't controversial at all. Not even a little. Any way you break this play down. Grabbing a player around the neck from behind while she's airborne, moving toward the basket with zero chance to protect herself, is exactly the kind of contact the flagrant rule exists to punish. There was no gray area here. No, it depends how you look at it. The defender was gone. Security escorted her to the tunnel. The game restarted. And by every basketball standard on record, that should have been the end of this story. It wasn't. Not even close. Because right after the final buzzer, the head coach of the team whose player had just been ejected for a foul near the neck walked up to the podium and said something that honestly should have made every reporter in that room sit up straighter. Music, he said his player was simply trying to make a defensive play on the basketball. He said he personally didn't agree with the flagrant 2 ruling. Defender who had just been ejected posted Music publicly, and she didn't stop at defending herself or complaining about the officiating. Music, she used the specific words white privilege and tagged the opposing franchise directly in the post. She wasn't just frustrated about a call. She was publicly claiming that the foul, the flagrant upgrade, the ejection, Every part of the official's decision came down to bias in favor of Cunningham because of who Cunningham is. Let that sink in for a second. That's not a vague vent session. That's a specific public accusation tied to a specific team built around a specific and extremely loaded idea. And it wasn't hidden. Music, it wasn't a private message that somehow leaked out later. It went up publicly. It was worded plainly. Music, and within minutes, it was everywhere. Basketball fans saw it. Reporters saw it. Every major sports account covering the league saw it. Music, the only person on the planet who apparently hadn't seen it, according to his own words, was the head coach of the team the player played for. So when reporters brought the post directly to him and asked what he thought, he gave the exact same answer as before. He said he was hearing about it for the first time right then from the person asking the question. Now really think about what that means when you put both answers side by side. This is a coach claiming he hadn't reviewed a foul serious enough to end in an ejection. And in that same conversation claiming he also hadn't seen a viral racially charged social media post from that very same player publicly tagging an opposing team hours after the incident happened. Both excuses landed at the exact same moment back to back, and both conveniently let him avoid taking any real position on either issue. That's the pattern worth zeroing in on here. Not ignorance, music, timing. Every single time a hard question came his way, the answer was some version of "I haven't gotten to that yet." Music. The foul stays conveniently unresolved. The post stays conveniently unrest. Music. And while all of that gets quietly parked in some imaginary pile of things to review later, the player who actually got hurt is the one left standing there holding the bag in real time in front of everyone. Because let's not lose sight of what actually happened to Cunningham in the middle of all this noise. Music, she's the one who got physically ripped off her feet by contact near her neck. Music, she's the one who absorbed the hit, crashed to the floor, and had to pick herself up in front of a packed arena and cameras from every angle. The officials reviewed the exact play and made their decision based purely on what they saw happen to her body. And instead of the conversation staying locked on that dangerous, reckless, unnecessary foul, it flipped completely upside down within hours. Music, suddenly, she was the one being talked about like she had done something wrong, like her identity and not the hand that came across her throat was somehow the real issue everyone should be focused on. Cunningham didn't disappear into silence. And honestly, she handled this about as well as anyone realistically could. She came out afterward and made a point of saying she's absorbed hard fouls before across her career, and she's never had a problem accepting the physical part of the game when it's called fairly. Music, she was crystal clear that this situation was never about race, never about privilege, never about anything except a dangerous play that crossed the line and needed to be called exactly the way the officials called it. She's the one who took a hit near her face and throat. She shouldn't have had to stand in front of microphones explaining why getting hit like that is a problem in the first place. Music, that shouldn't require an explanation. That should be obvious to everyone watching. But by the time she said any of that, the internet had already sprinted off with a completely different version of events. Media personalities and online commentators started picking sides, music, and a noticeable chunk of them weren't landing on the side of a dangerous foul happened and got correctly punished. The conversation drifted further and further away from the actual contact, and towards something bigger, messier, and honestly a lot less about basketball. Suddenly, people were arguing about whether Cunningham gets treated differently by officials in general, whether she benefits from some kind of unspoken advantage around the league, whether this entire situation was ever really about a foul at all, or whether it had quietly become a stand-in for a much bigger cultural argument that had nothing to do with the game she plays. And that's exactly the problem with how this whole thing spiraled. A hit to the neck. Music, a clear, obvious flagrant, a clean, correct ejection call. All of it got buried under a debate that had nothing to do with what actually happened on that basketball court. Here's why this matters way beyond just one single game. When a head coach won't clearly and immediately say that a dangerous play was dangerous, players around the league notice. They quietly learn that maybe these plays aren't taken as seriously behind closed doors as the official rulebook claims they are. Music, when a coach says on record that he hasn't reviewed obvious video evidence involving his own player in a moment this significant, people are naturally going to start wondering if that's actually true or if it's just the easiest, safest thing to say into a microphone in the moment. music, and when a player publicly puts out an inflammatory, racially charged accusation and the head coach acts like he had absolutely no idea even existed, that only music leaves two real possibilities. Either he genuinely wasn't paying attention to one of his own players during one of the biggest moments of a season, which is bad enough on its own, or he was paying attention, saw exactly what happened, and chose to pretend otherwise anyway, which is a whole lot worse. Either direction you take that, it's a credibility problem, and it's one that absolutely did not have to happen. Nobody forced this coach into that corner. He walked into it voluntarily, one vague non-answer at a time. He could have stood at that same microphone and said something simple, something honest, something that takes about 10 seconds to say out music loud. A dangerous play is a dangerous play. No matter who's involved or what team they play for, the officials got the call right. My player will learn from this, and it won't happen again. That's the whole statement. That's all it would have taken to shut this entire spiral down before it ever got started. Instead, he chose vague deflection on the foul itself and complete total silence on the social media post. And both of those choices together left a wide-open vacuum that got filled almost instantly with speculation, outrage, and a story that spun way outside the actual basketball being played. Music, Cunningham, to her credit, refused to get pulled down into that spiral with everyone else. She acknowledged the foul happened exactly the way it looked. She accepted that the ejection was the correct call, and she made it unmistakably clear that she wasn't going to let herself become a talking point about identity politics, music, instead of simply being a player who took a rough, unnecessary, and completely avoidable hit. She drew that line clearly, calmly, and without hesitation. The coaching response on the other side should have matched that same level of clarity, and music didn't. And that gap right there is exactly where all of this extra chaos actually came from. Think for a second about how differently this entire situation plays out with just one honest, direct sentence from the sideline right after the final buzzer. Instead, a routine, correctly officiated, flagrant foul turned into a multi-day story about race, bias, and league-wide politics that had almost nothing to do with the actual play. A player who did absolutely nothing wrong got dragged into publicly defending her own integrity on record for a hit she didn't throw and didn't deserve. And a coach who had every single opportunity to shut this whole thing down early instead chose delay after delay and vague deniability, and in doing so made his entire organization look worse with every passing hour. That's the real story buried underneath all of this. It was never really the foul itself. It was never even the ejection. Both of those on their own were handled exactly the way they were supposed to be handled in the moment. No controversy required.